Hey everybody, welcome into this magic Zoom room. It isn't really magic. The room itself isn't magic because the room itself is just a blank room. When the people are not in the room, it's just emptiness talking to emptiness, which has some magic to it also if you really listen, I suppose. But I think what happens is magic happens when two people come into a room and start to have a conversation. And depending on their ability to actually hear what each other's saying, to the scope that they can hear more, more happens. To the scope they hear less, less happens. So my only agenda in coming into this room is to love and accept people, to listen to them and make sure they know they've been heard, and to acknowledge and validate them. I'm not thinking in my head, what's the next question? I'm not thinking, how can I argue with what they're saying? I'm not thinking, how do I prove them wrong? I have no desire to prove anybody wrong. Everybody's entitled to believe whatever they want, especially in this room. I just want to hear what it is they believe. So I may question what it is if I don't understand it, but it's not with the thought of trying to trick them up or do anything like that. We have enough of that in the world around us. What I want to create is one little oasis here, which is called the conversation room, where we have an opportunity to see what real conversation could be like if we choose to have it. I should mention before we get too far into it that the show is thankfully being sponsored by the Mosaic. And it's so appropriate because the Mosaic's a book I wrote, which is about almost exactly what I'm doing in this room. It's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults, where'd my parents go? Where are they? What's happened? How do I find them again? They said to me, oh, Danny, they're in a place called heaven. So because I wanted to find them, I went out and searched for the place called heaven. And in the book, the character's name is Mo. And Mo met people not that he expected to meet. He didn't meet the clergy and the holy people and the medicine women and the coaches and the shamans and the teachers. He met the trash man and the street worker, the blind woman and the homeless guy. And he wondered, why am I meeting these people? Of all people, what are these people going to show me about heaven? But in every single case, when he sat with them and allowed them to tell them their story, the person he walked away from wasn't at all the person he came up to. And it wasn't because they had changed. It was because his perception of them had changed. And when he realized that what he initially sees in the world that he looks at isn't at all the world that is, he wondered if he saw anything the way it was. And could he slide himself out of the way just for a glimpse of what the world might look like if he didn't block it by his vision of it. At that moment, he looked to his right and he saw a monk unzipping the sky and inviting him to walk through the opening in the sky into a parallel reality, where he met with the wise one who was the keeper of the mosaic, and he was arranging all the pieces of the world to go and have interactions the way they were meant to be. If that story entices you, my sponsor would love for you to go to Amazon and pick it up, or go to my website and pick it up. All that information will be in the show notes. I would love you to do it because I would love to see what your experience of it is as you read it and what perceptions in you change as a result of reading it. But now we want to slide our sponsor in the Mosaic to the right, because we have in this room someone that I am excited to meet. She's not a complete stranger because I know somebody who knows her and she's she's friends with that person, but I've never talked to Michelle. I've never met her. I've never seen her. I only know that she's friends with someone who I had as a stranger in this room and had a great experience and said to her, you might want to do this. So I don't know if it will be a great decision on her part or not. Let's see what happens. But Michele Julian, welcome to the conversation. How are you today?
I'm wonderful.
I'm
absolutely wonderful, and I'm very excited to be here. And I'm just going to actually shut off one of my alarms.
Okay.
Because it actually just keeps going on and on. It was supposed to alarm me to make sure that I wasn't late for our date.
Okay.
Here
Well,
we
it's
are.
done its job.
Must have pressed snooze.
Don't we love when technology works, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love strangers. I love meeting strangers. And, technically we're strangers. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
What do you love about meeting strangers?
I think what it is mostly that I like about meeting strangers is not knowing what exactly they're going through themselves
Mm-hmm.
in their own journey. And so for me, I'm always just very curious
Yeah.
about what people are thinking and feeling and experiencing. And so, it's not uncommon for me to be walking in Boston because I live real close to Boston. I live in a town called Watertown, and I can take the T and I can take, the subway. And so for me, if I see somebody that I'm kind of curious about, I'll just start a conversation. And I think I kind of learned that when I was a little girl from my dad.
Wow. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that now,
Mm-hmm.
let me go back to the first question I asked you. Because it's so easy to say, how are you? And to say great, fine, good.
Mm-hmm.
And carry on as if it's a salutation rather than a question of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'd really like to do is make it a question of interest.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of stuff going on right now in the world that we live in. We got a global pandemic.
Mm.
We got a race movement where people are of different colors standing up and saying, hey, this just isn't right that we're treated differently than you are. We have a Me Too movement where women are standing up and saying this just isn't right the way we're treated differently than you are. And a lot of it as a white male, I'm looking at having to redefine a lot of the things that I thought I had defined. And I thought that I defined them with an open heart, but I still see that there's situations and little pieces of things that I really need to cleanse out before I can ask the world around me to cleanse itself. We also have a lot of our global institutions that are falling apart. I just read in the news yesterday that the Hilton in Times Square, an iconic hotel, is shutting down, not just for a little while, permanently. And a big hotel in Beverly Hills is shutting down permanently because they can't afford to pay their mortgages anymore. And they believe it's just the tip of the iceberg for the hospitality industry.
Mm.
So as businesses are shutting down, as churches and synagogues are re-looking at how they bring people together, how are you really doing?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, for me, I am so, so fortunate that I have my health and I have a partner that I can share my own anxieties and worries with. So I feel very fortunate for that. So for me, I have a lot of gratitude for my own experience going through this, right?
Yeah.
So I am fortunate that I have a support unit. And I think that people that don't have a support unit, don't have someone to talk to, it can be quite scary for people and disheartening. But what I feel when I do talk to strangers, which I do quite often, because it's just my nature, because I learned it from my dad, is that we all have this feeling that's similar, that we know that things are not the same and things are difficult. But at the same time, at least we have that in common, right? maybe my suffering is not as bad as someone else's suffering, but we have similar energies, right?
Yeah.
That we're both in this together in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Michele, what's important to you?
Lots of things are important to me. Like, I guess, like, the main thing is really about connecting with other human beings.
Yeah. From your lesson from your dad, right?
Yeah. My dad, he was quite the messenger,
Yeah.
for us all.
Is he still around or has he passed?
No, he's in heaven. With my mom, they both passed away, and my mom recently, it's going to be 2 years this January that she's passed away, and my dad passed away before her. And I'll never forget what my mother said to me when I was with her at the nursing facility, because she had depleted so much that we had to get her in there. And she said, "I think I have a plan to see your dad sooner than I anticipated."
Wow.
And I said, and we were just kind of walking, through the aisles. I said, "Really, Mom? Why do you say that?" And she says, "Well, your dad came and he visited me. He told me that it was time for me to join him."
Wow.
Because he wanted to share the delicious food. And that's something totally my dad would say.
Yeah.
Because he's Italian and my mother's Irish. So, yeah, he'd definitely be saying this.
I love that. So for the listener who hears that, I just want to ask you to get involved in the conversation. Do you believe, first of all, do you believe it? Like, there's no reason why Michele would be making this up, right? But do you believe that it's possible that someone who has passed can come to their loved one and communicate a message, and the loved one can hear that message? Do you believe, if you believe that, what does it take for you to believe that? Do you believe that we're more than just this form? If you don't believe it, what prevents you from believing it? And just start to ask yourself questions, because in every conversation that we have, there are questions it asks. There are intuitions that we can feel about what we actually think and believe. Not that we have to believe what anybody says or don't have to believe it, but let's use them as an opportunity to get to know what we believe and stop just making pretend we don't believe anything and just going on like that. So I love that story.
Oh, that's such a good way for people to kind of like examine their thought patterns and be curious about what it is that person is saying, instead of being like,
Yeah.
immediately like, no, that can't happen.
Yeah. And I love, if you do say, no, that can happen, or I don't believe it, what is it in you that makes it that you have to come that quickly and say it? What is that? Is there a fear that if I did believe it, something would happen? Would it go against something that I believe? What is it that makes you want to do that? Michele, what makes you happy?
Talking to people. Talking to people, being with people, being with my grandchild, being with my family. Really, I know that I'm on this planet Earth for a very short time. We think we have a long time, but because I've had 4 near-death experiences, I know that to be true, that you just don't know when your time is up. So, with that being said, I think I should be engaging and paying attention to what my experience is every day. Like it's the last day of my life.
Love it. So I'm really interested in it because everything you've said up until this point shows how social you are and how much you enjoy conversation. And even in the answer to what makes you happy, it's in the conversation with other people, and you honor your dad by having conversations with strangers. So if for some reason you were locked in a room where there was nobody else around, would you be
Okay.
unhappy?
Right away, probably not. But if it was more than it was probably more than like I would say 5 or 6 days, I think then I'd be unhappy. I think I could be okay for like, 5 or 6 days. And the reason why I say that is because I've worked with my mind
Yeah.
in being with myself and my thoughts.
Okay.
So
what changes after 5 or 6 days that you can be 5 or 6 days where you would be okay, but after 5 or 6 days, you wouldn't be okay?
I think it would be because I would need some kind of human interaction feedback that would allow me to feel almost like alive, I guess,
Yeah.
in a way. I think what it is for me about being with someone else and connecting with them, it helps me feel alive. It fills me up. Instead of depleting me, it fills me up. Like some people get drained by other people.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of that. I actually feed off of other people's energies, which
Yeah.
can be good and bad.
Yeah.
But so I would start to feel like a little disconnected
Yeah.
somehow in my own energetic field. So yeah, that's why I know for a fact that I could probably last for 5 or 6 days, and then after that I'd have to like get in the car and find somebody.
So if, with your permission, and you're welcome to say I'm not interested in answering that, okay?
Sure.
Do you feel disconnected from yourself?
Oh.
Because, and part of the reason why I'm asking is, all of the spirituality, and I know you practice some spiritual things yourself, tell us that our happiness is inside of ourselves.
Right.
And it seemed like your definition of what would change is that after 5 or 6 days, you would feel disconnected to the world around you, and the world around you fills you up.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So what I'm wondering is, if there's a disconnection, like what prevents you from filling yourself up, if anything?
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. And
Every once in a while, a blind squirrel catches a nut,
I think it's something I would need to contemplate, right? I don't think I could really kind of like answer the question off the cuff.
Yeah.
But it's something to contemplate, which I would like to do. I would do that. I would contemplate and probably even kind of get back to you on that.
I would love that.
I mean, I think it's a juicy, juicy question, and it's pertinent to what's happening here in this pandemic where we can't really sometimes connect and see each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's really a good contemplation.
So having spent 10 years as a monk in a monastery, I know the power of what it's like to go through those walls that make me think that I need somebody else to make me happy. I'm not saying that that's something you have to do. For me, it was a very important practice because it's my makeup. And there was something exquisite when I let go of the thought that someone else was essential, that someone else needed to fill me up, which isn't really what you're saying. You're not saying that they need to fill you up, but you get filled up by your interactions with people.
Right, right.
And yet you know that your mom told you your dad came to her out of body and said, it's time for you to come back to be with me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So physicality of a person's body isn't necessarily what fills you, because your mom heard that so strongly she decided to go with that. Allegedly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you've had 4 near-death experiences, which we just glossed over that like it was nothing, but I want to talk about that too. But in those near-death experiences, apparently you came to some terms with your situation and yourself that had nothing to do with anybody else, or maybe it did. Like, I don't know what the situations were, but I think it's interesting, not only for you that I asked this question, but I asked the question for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable enough with yourself that you can spend 5, 6 days with yourself, 5, 6 months with yourself, 5, 6 years with yourself, 5, 6 decades with yourself? And what if you are? What, if anything, would that change in the way you are with people? How would the ability to be completely content and happy in yourself change the way you interact, or not?
It's a good question.
We'll put part 2 up when Michelle gets back to me, if she does.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I can't wait to tell my husband, because my husband, he's done a silent retreat for probably, if not 3 or 4 months, it could be even longer, by himself. And I probably would, ask him the question, or tell him you asked me the question, and he would look at me and go,
right.
like that, like,
yeah, like, what do you think? Well, so it's interesting, because years ago I sat in something called Vipassana meditation. And it was 10 days where they put me in a room, and I volunteered. I went to it. I wanted to go. I paid for it. And for the first 7 or so hours, I was in bliss. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I died and went to heaven. Nobody's interrupting me. I sat in meditation. I had the most blissful meditation. About 7 hours into it, I got a little hungry, and I started to wonder, are they ever going to come and feed us? Like, what's going on? At 10 hours into it, nobody had come. And I thought, oh my God, what a racket. They just lock you in a room and they don't even talk to you. And so I started banging on the door, and people came and said, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I said, I'm pissed. Where are you guys? What's going on? And they said, hold it. I think we got to take you to our teacher. So I went to the teacher, and I told him, I sat with him, and he said, how you doing? I said, I'm really pissed right now, because it feels like you guys are crooks. You just lock me in a room and take my money. And he said, so did you feel that from the minute you walked into the room? I said, no. When I walked into the room, I had like 7 hours of absolute bliss, and it was perfect. And then I started to get a little hungry, and then I started to think, like, where are you guys? So he said, so what changed on the 7th hour? I said, well, I got hungry. Mm-hmm. He said, but like, did the temperature in the room change? Mm-hmm. Did the lighting in the room change? Mm-hmm. Did the heat or coolness of the room change? And I said, no, it was all the same. So he said, so who changed? I said, I changed. He said, okay, I think it's time to go back into the room and figure out what in you changed when everything around you was the same. Why was it great for you for the first 7 hours and not so great for you after? What happened? And he put me back in the room, and I had the most beautiful 10 days there in that room because I broke through that.
Did they feed you?
Yeah, they fed us. They just didn't feed me when I thought it was going to happen. They had their schedule, but I just didn't know what their schedule was. And over time, I understood the routine, so they fed us. But they could have easily not fed me. It wasn't like once I realized that I was in control of my destiny in that room.
Right.
Because I was my maker there. Nothing was changing outside of me. That was all. whether I was hungry or not, I could also work with that too.
Mhm.
Anyway, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 is I hardly ever listen, and 10 is I listen so much. If you looked up listening in the dictionary, you would see my picture. Where do you place yourself?
I would say I'm a 1 that I'm a really good listener, or a 10 that I'm a really good listener.
10, you're a really good listener. Shows that you didn't really listen. No, I'm teasing you.
I'm probably like, 6, 7,
Yeah.
something like that. Always strive to pay attention and listen, especially, when I'm getting to know somebody
Yeah.
new. I have a tendency to be less of a good listener when I'm with someone that I really know really well, like, i.e., like my mate.
Yeah, I know that one.
It's almost like you have like selective listening. And it's always shocking to me too, because like, it's not that he's not interesting. He's like really interesting, and I'm always interested in what he has to say, but it's almost like something happens with my brain that I thought that I heard what I heard, but it was not the right thing.
So why do you think we listen to the people that are least important to us and don't listen to the people that are most important to us?
It's probably because it's not that we're not listening to the people that are most important to us. It's mostly that we think we know what they're going to say,
I got you.
or potentially, if it's not that we know what they're going to say, we know the flavor of
Yes.
it. We're not really tuning in.
Yeah.
When you don't know somebody at all, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the interesting things that's come out of conversations in this room is people have said to me, it's so easy to talk to a stranger. I say stuff to you that I would never say to the closest people I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, why is that? And they say, well, there'd be like the people that know me might judge what I'm saying.
Mm.
And I said, but those are the people closest to you. Like, why would they judge you? Why would you think I won't judge you? I mean, I'm not going to judge you, but why would you think that a stranger won't judge you? And they said, well, a stranger it doesn't matter to me. They're not close enough to me that it matters. But someone close to me judging me would matter.
Right.
Your thoughts?
I think that, I think people think that people that don't know each other are not judging each other, but to me, I think that's incorrect.
Yeah.
I think that people are always judging,
Yeah.
whether they know them or not. They're making their mind up about what the person's saying. They're deciding if they agree or disagree, kind of sort of like what you were talking about in the beginning. Are you really present, being with this stranger, being open, or are you thinking about what you're going to say after that person maybe stops talking?
Yeah.
Are you really being present? Are you really listening to the person?
Yeah.
And are you really understanding what that person's saying? So I think that's a whole nother level of listening.
Yeah. Totally. I remember for a while I was in what I did for a living was I went into corporations and talked about innovation. And I would go into corporations and they would be in 3-piece suits or, pantsuits or whatever they were wearing. And I would come in jeans and a t-shirt. And I remember walking into this one room and the people said, well, excuse me, can we help you? We're about to have a meeting here. And I said, yeah, I know. I'm just here. And they said, are you here to get the trash? And I said, well, yeah, now that you mention it, I think I am. And they said, well, can you get the trash and just get out? I said, well, it'll be hard for me to get the trash without us starting the meeting. But I think I have a good idea where the trash is. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, you hired me to give the talk on innovation. If you want to send me out, I've been paid already, so I'm more than happy to go. But how do you think you're doing innovating so far? And they said, oh my God, I can't believe you're the one that's giving the talk. I said, yeah, you expected me to look and dress just like you, right? How did you think innovation was going to come from that? How closed are you when someone comes in and looks differently than you expect them to be, to getting information from that? Maybe we're ready to start our conversation on innovation right now. Because everybody judges a book by its cover, even though we say not to. And so it's always been my desire, my joy, to show a different cover than what's inside. So to see if people stop there, or to show the cover that I want to show. It's not different, it's just a different dimension. How are you at looking at the cover and reading the book and seeing if they're the same?
I really feel like one of my skills, I guess, as a human being is my curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm very, very curious to the point that sometimes it can cause me suffering. If you know what I mean by that.
No, I want you to tell me what you mean by that, because I don't want to assume that I know what you mean.
Okay, so because I'm so curious, I have a tendency sometimes to be curious about, let's say if I'm interested in your book, right? And I want to like find out more about it. Before I even buy it, I would probably look at it online and kind of like really want to know like what it was about, like before I even like get it. Almost like, you know how they do that with movies, they give you previews and it's like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like you just saw the whole movie. You watched the preview.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of takes out the surprise of life.
Yeah.
You know, and I can do that. I can take the surprise out of life out of my own like journey of being curious. So that's like the negative part of it. But I think the positive part of it is being open, you know, wanting to know more. Like, what is this mosaic? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, perfect.
About like, ooh, I just like, even what's the word? What does that word even mean? You know, I'm curious. And by the way, I actually have your book.
I love that. Thank you so much.
I already bought it because, you know, Jessa said she got it. I was like, oh, I'm going to get it too. And, you know, it's kind of like girls do that. They were like, oh, I love that. Oh, I've got to get it too. You know what I mean?
Have you started it yet?
Oh, yeah.
And how is it going for you?
I love the pictures.
Wow.
I touch the picture.
That's so interesting.
It gives me energy.
That's so interesting.
What I absolutely positively love, because I'm a writer too, is that you write so like differently. Like you write for you and how you want to write.
Yeah.
And it's like you breaking the rules, like in a way, right? Like I'm like, yeah, he's a rule breaker. I like this guy.
I love that. Well, one of the things that happened when I wrote it, which was really interesting, and when I created it, and when I chose the pictures, and when I chose the cover, and I created it, and I created the actual book, I wanted people who just seeing it and holding it would feel something from it, that they didn't even need to read it. I wanted them to be able to feel an energy coming from it, that they would feel in their inner being. Mm-hmm. And I love that you say, I love just putting my hands on the pictures and they have power. They feel powerful. Mm-hmm. So I love that somehow something what I intended has come through.
Yeah. I like the weight of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the weight of the book. I like basically the format of just holding, how I can hold it in my hand.
Yeah.
And I don't think I actually have had a book like this ever. And
Wow.
I have a lot of books because I have done 1,000 trillion hours of continuing education
Yeah.
for my occupation. So it's just like, I love it. It's almost like a little notebook,
Yeah.
that I can bring with me, like in my like little briefcase bag, and I could just pull it out when I just kind of want to relax and kind of get out of my head and like look at the picture and, and maybe read a little bit and then kind of contemplate. That's the feeling
Yeah.
that
Love
I
it.
sense with it.
We're going to
So
just a little plug. We're going to do starting October 1st I'm working with a company called High Tide, and High Tide has put together a book club that is going to be a 4-week program that it's really inexpensive. I think it's $40 for the whole 4 weeks. And
I already signed up for it.
You already signed up?
Yes.
I love it. Okay, good. So, so what I want people to feel, and thank you for having it. Thank you for signing up for it. Thank you for your kind words about it. But I want people to feel that are listening is that our energy goes into everything we do. And if we're conscious about the energy that we put into something, how is it possible that someone I don't know, on the recommendation of someone I only know a couple weeks, would first of all pick up the book, would then like the feel of it, would like to hold it, would like to feel the pictures, would sign up for the book club, would do these things? Why does that all happen? And how is it that when the work that you do, what intention are you putting into your work? Do you go there and just show up and do your time and walk away? Or do you intentionally put yourself in everything that you do? And do people feel it if you do that? Like, you can intentionally do it and people don't feel it. But do people feel what you're doing? And do people experience you through everything that you do? Fascinating conversation to have with yourself.
Well, if you haven't noticed as you are getting to know me, is I'm very passionate.
Yes, I do notice that. And how does that passion play out?
It plays out in every facet of my life.
Does it ever embarrass you?
No.
I love that. So one of the things that we're totally off script now, which is fine. I love it, because when you said that, one of the things that's going on in my life right now is when I talked about the Mosaic to people, one of the things that I would say to them is, when you read it, don't only read the words, allow yourself to understand what the space between the words is saying. And the Mosaic told me to say it, and I thought I understood what it was talking about, but I really didn't understand what I was saying that much. I just understood there was more to the book than the words. And lately I've been having this experience where I'm connecting to people thousands of miles away. And there's such an intimate experience that people are having intimate experiences. And it's not because I'm trying to do something, but as they open up energy centers within their body, they're experiencing things they haven't experienced before. And they take the creative center, which is the second chakra, which is also the sexual center. And because they're not used to being creative, or they're blocked creatively, that energy turns into a sexual energy. Their passion becomes sexual, and they actually experience. People have written me that I didn't even know what was going on, that they said, I was just thinking about you and I just had an orgasm. And it's clearly not because of this body form, because this body form's an older, decrepit guy, overweight, broken down. Okay, so it's clearly not this body form that's happening. There's something in the energy. And it started to be problematic for me, because I was saying, hold it, what's this going on? Until I realized that they're awakening a creativity within themselves. That they don't know what that means. So they're used to that being sexual. So they go towards sex. Talk to me about your passion and your creativity.
Okay, so when you use the word passion, some people do, not everybody. Some people say, Oh, she's talking about sex.
Yeah.
Oh, she's talking about orgasms, right?
Yeah.
So yes and no, right?
Yeah.
Because life is a potential for anything to happen.
Yeah.
You can have a strong propensity to really be in love with something or an experience that it brings you to tears. And people think, oh, that's sadness. It's joy.
Yeah.
It's joy. So when I'm working in my own life, I'm always staying open to what it is I'm thinking and feeling. But in my mind's eye, I know, because I'm on this planet for a very short period of time, that I could miss something. So why not have an attitude of passion so I can really embrace and really be in that moment and be in that experience.
Love it.
That's when I say I'm passionate about everything, and it can translate into energy that is uplifting and filled with magnetism, right? And all of that. And we have so much negativity. The minute we wake up, we have negativity. Okay, so why not take our senses and our being and start intentionally thinking something positive,
Yeah.
something that can help us feel happy,
Yeah.
because really, you must know this with your training of meditation and all of that, is we all have this capacity to be love and to love. It's there. It's just waiting for us to call on it, to pay
Yeah.
attention to.
Yeah. Love that. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. And time is unfortunately running down. Um, Michele, if there was one thing you wanted to say and you had a couple minutes to say it to a
Mm-hmm.
world that was listening, what is it you would want to say?
I would say, my angels are talking to me. I would say, change your attitude. Change your attitude. If you have an attitude of negativity, reframe it and try to have a more optimistic view.
Love it. So I love that, and I don't want to counter that because I want to, but I also want to give a different perspective. And this is really new to me in the last year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know quite how long. If you're negative, try this on, and I'm lobbing this over the net for this to be the last question I ask you. If people are negative and they try and change their attitude,
Mm-hmm.
some people will win and they'll change and they'll be able to overpower it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people won't, because they'll go back to the pattern of what they are because it hasn't been resolved in some ways. And I know you're not saying don't leave it unresolved. I know you're saying change it by resolving it.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like to invite people to do is, where do you stand on this? Because here's another possibility for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to feel your negativity, because I think we stop feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't feel things, or else if we felt them, we wouldn't do them. We just get caught in the thought of this is what I can do. I want you to sit in your negativity and feel it. I don't want you to build a house there. I just want you to walk through it and feel what it feels like to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want you to catch yourself in the course of the day and feel what it feels like when you feel uplifted and positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to marry those two concepts. And I want to see what the baby of that concept is.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to sort of experience all of the experiences and create a mosaic of them.
Mm-hmm.
And allow that to be your mosaic, and not to define yourself by your negativity or your positivity, not to scold yourself for feeling one or feeling the other, but just to embrace it all and say it's all a part of me. And how would that feel for you? To give a new definition to the way you live your life, which is neither or, but both. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's about being open. It's
Yeah,
about that open, conscious awareness of curiosity.
love it. Love it. Michele, we're going to list all your links and your website and all that stuff, but what's the best way out of all those? What's the one best way for people to contact you?
The one best way to reach me is at juliangoddesscoaching.com.
Okay. So you'll see that. You don't have to write it down. You'll see that in the show notes, and know that juliangoddesscoaching.com is the place where you're likely to get the quickest, best response.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much for being here. There's so much left to talk about, but we got started. I so appreciate you being open and having this conversation. I so appreciate even more that curious side of you that wants to research everything still sat down and had a conversation with a stranger, which was somewhat unresearched, but a little researched probably. And I want to just thank you for just sharing yourself with us so openly. For those of you who listen, I want to thank you again for coming to the show, and just, if you like what you heard, share it with people you like. That's what we do. You know, we go to a restaurant we like, we tell people, you got to go to this restaurant. You got to try this. It was really good. Well, if you like this conversation, do the same thing. What I want to have happen is that strangers meet strangers and like strangers, and we become friends. Because when you share a stranger with someone you like, the stranger already has somebody else that will like them and they'll like. And we'll start to do stuff together. We'll fall in love with each other and start to work with each other, not because someone's selling us on what they do, but because we fell in love with them through getting to meet them. You know, when we live as strangers, we live in a strange world. But look how long it took to start a friendship. I would call Michele my friend now. Before she came into the room, 10 minutes before, I had no idea she even existed. So how quick can you turn a stranger into a friend? Not by manipulating them or doing it, but just by being open and receiving them and listening to them. It doesn't take a college degree or an ordination. Just go up to someone you don't know and just ask them how you're doing, just like Michelle's dad taught her to do, and just like Michele does now with people. And she doesn't research them, by the way. She just walks up to a stranger and says, how you doing? And sits with them. Mm-hmm. And so what would happen if you did that? What might just happen is a strange world might become a friendly world. And we're living in a time where the friendlier the world is, the better it would be for all of us. We have enough strangeness happening. Let's see if we can bring friendship in. Michele, is there one last thing you want to say before we go?
Yes. The last thing would be is when you're open to talking to a stranger, think about the possibility of you learning something that you never knew before.
Love that. Love that. So folks, between now and the next stranger that comes into this room, be open to the possibility of learning from everything that exists. Go up to those strangers and make them friends and see what you might learn. See how their perspective might change your perspective. And in the meantime, be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. Love each other and love yourself. Learn from each other And take time to listen to your own voice and learn from yourself as well. Until the next stranger comes in, I wish you only the best. I look forward to a world of friends, not strangers, and to meeting you, if we haven't already, in this room for a conversation. Thank you so much. Ciao.